Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our June Association Exchange. Today, we're going to be talking about how to create great virtual teams. I just have a few housekeeping announcements, and then we'll get started with our speaker. I'm Sherry Singer. I'm founder and co-organizer of Association Exchange. And I just want to send out a special thanks today to the three other co-organizers that I work with every month. Adam Hostetter, Jamie Ballou, and Kirk Gallagher. And each one of us helps out in a different way to bring Association Exchange to you for free every month. Also want to say thanks a lot to all of our monthly program coordinators. This will be our last meeting. We take a summer hiatus in July and August, and we'll be back in September with another fabulous and free program that will help you in your professional development as an association executive. So I'm going to introduce our monthly program coordinator, Scott Morris, who's one of the original members of Association Exchange. We've been around for 4 years now, and Scott will introduce our speaker today. One other announcement, please feel free to type your questions in the chat box. We will monitor both the Q&A and the chat, but it's a lot easier to type them right into the chat so everyone can see your question. And we'll answer as many as we can in the time that we have. Thanks so much again for joining us, and I'll turn it over to Scott.
Thank you, Sherry, and hello, everyone. As Sherry said, today, team building is the focus of our presentation. And in the workplace, team building is the process of creating a team that is cohesively working together towards a common goal. The importance and main purpose of team building is to create a strong and solid team through forming bonds and connections. Now, team building is much easier to accomplish when every member of the team is together in the workplace on a more or less daily basis. However, the coronavirus pandemic has really changed this particular team building scenario to a great extent. And what has team building been like during social distancing? Your team may have been remote or working on a hybrid basis. So, how have you kept all team members engaged? How have you managed and your organizations, how have they managed teamwork in the face of the pandemic? Tom Reynolds, Director of Education Services at the Maryland Municipal League, based in Annapolis, has done some research in this area and will explain to us how team building has changed in the last 2.5 years, and any further changes we can expect in the team building process in the years to come. Tom, I'd like to turn it over to you, and hope everyone has some good questions during Tom's presentation.
Thank you, Scott, and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us. Just to add on to the last Scott's request, which is to put questions in the chat. I would actually like to hear more. I would like to hear what all of you are doing. One of the qualifiers for me is, will I have a background in mediation, conflict resolution, also team building exercises and group facilitation. It would be a real stretch at this point, 2 years in, to call me or perhaps anybody a true expert in how you build and maintain teams in a virtual work environment. But we're going to give it a shot. I think the part of that request is that you all let us know what your experiences have been, the lessons you've learned. So please use the chat actively. We're also going to throw in, rather than a polling question, going to throw out a polling type question at some point along the way, and would love to get your feedback on what your current status is of your organization as far as remote work goes. So let's move on to the next slide. So first thing I want to do is lay out, what we can expect to get out of this session. One, I want to lay out a little bit of what work from home status looks like at this point in time. and also what expectations are increasingly of workers in a what's really an evolving post-pandemic workplace. And I think we're certain to see that these conditions are going to, actually, it's hard to say whether COVID is going to be the one that continues the most, or remote work, but certainly it's going to be here, I think, to stay. We want to share some some of the challenges that we all face as far as team building goes, because it certainly has presented a new level of challenges, and team building can be a challenge in and of itself. And then also want to look at some, calling them best practices, but at this point, they may be nothing more than, ideas, suggestions, and things that are working for us right now. So, which brings us to that much talked about polling question. So if you all could put into your chat, let us know what describes your organization's current work status. Are folks working entirely in the office? Are you mostly in the office? Is it a kind of a 50-50 split, mostly remote or entirely remote? And Scott's going to be calculating the percentages for us. I'm just kidding. Right, seeing a lot of entirely and mostly remote. Got a few 50-50 sprinkled in there. And at this point, that might be a sufficient sampling, but continue to put your thoughts in there and your experiences. So let's move on to, so again, this is kind of the background here. I did spend a little bit of time poking around and trying to see what kind of, I'm not conducting any of my own original research, but as Scott noted, I've done a little bit of poking around, and which included some internet searches. And the stunning conclusion, I suppose, is that employees really want to continue these flexible working relationships. So what we've seen from a recent Pew Research poll is, which I think is a pretty reliable resource, nearly 60% of workers who say that their job can be done from home have been doing that. And roughly the same percentage of those who are working from home say they're doing that now as a matter of choice rather than necessity. And I'd also might add that this is especially true of knowledge workers, which I think associations are primarily, if not almost exclusively, considered knowledge workers these days. And also, I think it's we need to recognize that those numbers are even higher for individuals who fall within the Gen X and millennial categories. And as we all look forward to retaining and hiring new employees, I think that's a really important point to be cognizant of. So another piece of that study is, and I think is really pertinent to what we're talking about here, is among adults that are who have rarely or never worked at home before, but are working from home at least some of the time now. First thing they found is that, or they're suggesting, is that it's easier for them to balance their work and their personal life from home. I think, no surprise there. That's 64%. But the piece that's, I think, especially relevant to this conversation is that workers are feeling, in large part, less connected to their coworkers than they were when they were in person. So I was initially really struck by the number, the 60% versus 4%. But I think if we factor in the 36, we could say 60% are feeling less connected, 40% are feeling either a handful more connected, but perhaps largely, equally as connected as they did before. But I still think this is a real obstacle, and it's something we want to be able to talk about. And it's, I think, the crux of the remote team building challenge. So, and that challenge is, how do we build and maintain successful teams in a virtual work environment? So as we go forward, I'm throwing out a few ideas that I've acquired, again, through research, some through observation, a lot of it through trial and error. And I would love to hear from some of you about what your thoughts are, what your experiences have been, and also some tips that you may have for navigating this brave new world of remote work. So the first consideration, I think, is organizational culture. So here's a definition that I pulled off from Center of Creative Leadership that I really like. It's a self-reinforcing web of beliefs, practices, and behaviors that form that organization's identity. Another way to say that might be values and procedural norms expressed within an organization. And what I tend to really like is it's basically how we do things around here. So, but what that involves is three components, among other things. But one thing to look at is how we communicate with each other. So, of course, that's central to this conversation. How we resolve conflict is also very much a part of our organizational culture. And then another piece would be what behaviors are awarded and then what behaviors are punished. So, the question I think or the reason why this is relevant is, looking at whether working remotely encourages us to reassess how we look at our organizational culture and what we do perhaps to recreate our organizational culture. So, it's going to define how you approach building teams within it. And it's also going to probably determine, or it's certainly impact your success in doing so. But I think it's also important to recognize that there's not one size or one template that fits all organizations. So, okay, let's start by assuming that your organization has a functional and healthy organizational culture, and you're trying to maintain it going forward. So I'm going to here, as we go forward, point out some specific ideas on building remote teams. And the first one is the need to ensure that your staff feels connected and supported. So some of the things that management, and frankly, I think I'll emphasize over and over again that all staff should be doing is try and help your colleagues feel connected and supported. One of those things you can do is initiating regular contact. So I know in our office, there had been actually kind of a shift. So initially, I think there was a lot of reach out, a lot of connection as we were all checking in and making sure, we're doing okay and we're managing the technology all right. But then there was kind of a drop off in that, and then kind of a reemergence of that reconnecting. So I think that's important throughout the remote work experience. A big part of that too, as alluded to in the Pew study, was the importance of preserving work-life balance. As we noted, that's one of the real positives that folks have found in working remotely. And it's also one of the drivers of remote work because people are appreciating that work-life balance. Another thing worth highlighting is the importance of being inclusive. And I think that's even more important in or at least more important to be cognizant of in a remote work environment, because I think there are a lot of the same challenges where people feel like they're being overlooked, they're not being included, and it's really important to recognize who those people are and connecting with them in ways that work best for them. Another thing is looking for burnout and stress. There was an excellent session that you all did last month on burnout, which is here very relevant as well. And also helping people to reduce stress. So another piece I would add is managing distractions. That's that's part of the balance too of preserving work-life balance. And most importantly, I think you need to create an atmosphere where people feel safe and they feel safe asking for what they need. Now I'm just going to pause for 1 second and look and see what's coming in on the chat. Oh, which is Sherry's request that people type questions, and again, questions and experiences and suggestions into that chat. So, so one thing we've learned that has become more prominent during remote work in the pandemic is an increase and also a hardening of silos. So according to a recent Harvard Business School study, we've seen a greater tendency for remote employees to split into more isolated and well-defined communication networks. And this can have some pros and cons. At least for those individual networks or those specific teams, there could be a real benefit of a bonding that goes on. But I think for most of our organizations, where we have membership, we have advocacy, we have, training and education. It's really essential that connections be built across those silos, and that has been, I think, a growing challenge during COVID. So some ideas for counteracting that shift. One is to create more cross-functional work where different units are working with each other, and also work groups, and also encouraging or encourage sharing project goals and what their status is. So if my particular unit is working on a project, let people know what we're working on. Let them know the status of that, because that helps to build those connections. And then also to try and organize meetings, not just, and where possible, and I think this is increasingly possible, is to do that outside of work. But the key piece is that employees need to be able to connect on non-work topics, non-work experiences, because there's a lot of real bonding that occurs, team building that occurs when we're able to connect on topics and experiences outside of work. And then the last thing is using software and platforms that encourage that kind of cross-department communication. So speaking of software, and because technology is so essential to how we communicate and work together, I wanted to throw in this particular slide related to technology and tools that can be helpful in building bridges. So, we want to do this cooperatively. We want to make sure that individuals are part of the process of selecting tools and in your technology. And then along with that, making sure that everybody gets adequate training and the kind of support you need in order to make that work. So one of the things I would love to, see some examples of, and what's working for all of you as far as tools and technology related to collaboration, and throw those into the app. But the obvious ones I think have been Teams, Microsoft, Google Docs, Basecamp, Slack, Zoom. I'm not sure how many people are using Skype these days, but that's certainly out there. And then some of the newer platforms like Trello and Miro. So I don't know if again, feel free to throw in other ideas. And I think along the same lines, everyone should have a clear understanding of what processes and expectations are. In short, we all want to be working off of the same playbook. But in developing those and adjusting those policies, I think we want to make sure that staff has opportunities to provide feedback in the creation of those policies. Give them opportunities to certainly ask questions where things might be unclear or problematic. And then another thing we'll keep going back to is that staff needs to feel comfortable. They need to feel empowered to ask those questions and to express their concerns. Another quick, okay, I see Diane Leach has put in Asana as a project management tool, and we've got an endorsement from Kyle Farmer on real-time, on Miro for real-time collaboration. And then Sherry's, and you can all see this, but talking about a session on smashing silos. So that is good information as well. Freed Camp. I need to make sure, can we get a copy of the chat? Because I would love to, or get some information related to what all this information is. That would be fantastic. All right, so, and this slide just happens to be what platforms and technologies have you used that have worked during the pandemic. Thank you to everybody for including that. Okay, so now going to move, I think, a little further into what would be the meat of the team building conversation here. And for that, I throw in a quote from former Duke basketball coach Mike Krzyzewski. I have to say this is a little bit difficult for me as a University of Maryland fan, which was a rival of Duke's, or maybe Duke was more a rival of Maryland for years and years. And Duke, by and large, fared much better than Maryland did in most cases. But nonetheless, Coach K has been widely regarded as a great leader. He's written books on leadership. And the reason why this quote doesn't capture it exactly, I wasn't able to find an exact quote, but I remember watching upon his retirement last year, they did an interview with him, and one of the things they asked about, is what allows him to, at one moment, criticize a player, really, critique the work they've done, including if they've done it poorly, and then the next moment be hugging each other. And the thing that Krzyzewski highlighted, he said, the key to having that, the key is trust. And so you need to be able to trust each other. And the way you build that trust is through relationships. And, trust isn't something that you show up with. It's not something that, your organization is, that can be purchased for your organization. It's something that you every day need to build and need to reinforce. So it's probably the most important component when it comes to building teams in any environment, whether it's remote or in person. But it is also, as we point out here, probably more difficult. You need to be a little more creative when it comes to doing that in a remote environment. So again, create and encourage opportunities for teams to connect personally so that they can socialize, they can build relationships. We talked about you're going to build the strongest relationships when you have opportunities to talk about things other than work. And it helps within your organization. It's going to help to both minimize misunderstandings that you might have, and it also helps you to move past them. So if I say something in a meeting or in person or over the phone or on a Teams meeting to a colleague, and it may sound insensitive or may sound like I'm blaming them for something, if she and I don't have a strong pre-existing relationship, it's going to be far easier for that to go to a bad place. So we want to, whereas if she and I have a good relationship, it's far more likely that she's going to, kind of set that aside, and maybe Tom misspoke, or she'll just ask me to clarify something. So I think that's really important. And then this is what you all have paid big money to talk about here, I'm sure, which is virtual team building activities. So first one is having an icebreaker or a gathering where you can at every meeting. So I had read something in my research that talked about an 8% rule, that 8% of every meeting should include some form of kind of, fun engagement, again, whether it's an icebreaker or just a gathering. I'm on the advisory council for a mediation council here in the county where I live. And one of the things we do before every meeting is a gathering. It can be something as simple as, okay, let's go around and what are you most looking forward to this summer? So then there's also traditional, there's games like, well, when you do games and activities, we have traditional games, things like show and tell, scavenger hunts. I want to tip my hat to my colleague, Kevin Connors, who when we did in 2020, we needed to transition really quickly. Rather than cancel our conference, we moved from what was supposed to be as of April, an in-person conference, and shifted to a virtual conference, and which I think was really successful in large part because folks were just happy to be doing stuff. But a part of what made that such a well-reviewed event was that we included things like scavenger hunts. So you're sitting here and you can go around and find things. Other stuff might be two truths and one lie. So there's a lot of games that that have been out there before that we're now incorporating here. One of the ones I love is Who the Baby, and that, which I hadn't heard of before, but taking pictures of staff when they're little babies and put them on screen, and everybody gets to guess who they are. So these are the kind of things that build bonds. There's other like hosted platforms you could use. We've got Jackbox. Virtual escape rooms are the kinds of things that you could do. And sometimes things as simple and I think as meaningful as doing like a brief guided meditation. So in the end, the best activities are those that serve multiple purposes, like building personal bonds and developing collaboration skills at the same time. But the important thing is it should be something that engages everyone. All right. And then with my conflict resolution background, of course, the conversation would not be complete without having some conversation about proactively resolving conflict. And so the first thing is, and this would have come out previously here, is that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So you really want to do your best to, build that team, keep the lines of communication open, have people, feel safe in communicating with each other. That's all the work to be done up front, because it reduces the likelihood that you're going to have dysfunctional conflict. And again, there can be good conflict and bad conflict, but that you catch that early on. And again, it's a preventative exercise, like eating your vegetables. The other thing I think is worth highlighting is when individuals are in conflict, when you're in conflict with somebody else, it's always best to deal with that in an in-person dialogue. That's going to be better than remote, but it runs along a continuum. So if you are, Zoom is going to be a far better place for you and I to work out some challenges we have than it will be via email. So anything that's synchronous is going to be superior to things that are not synchronous. And so email is one of the realities. We type things in, and if we're in conflict with somebody, the presumption on that other person on the other end is going to be colored by what our expectations are of you and what our experiences with the conflict so far. And whereas, again, going back to what I said before, is if I've got a good relationship with you, it's far more likely that I'm going to digest that and give you the benefit of the doubt. And then the final piece is if conflict is really looking problematic, bring in a mediator or another trained neutral third party to help you through. And a lot of you, if you're with larger organizations, you may have somebody with that skill set on board. So here is getting very near the end here. This quote I really like is, the challenge going forward is to understand the enduring value of focused face-to-face experience and then leveraging virtual ones to augment and extend them. Well, that blended future is still quite distant. Again, this was published in January of 2021. I'm not sure how distant that is, but companies will need to start considering what warrants face-to-face interaction and how to make the most of those precious opportunities. So what I'm taking from this is that you really need to make decisions about when you want to connect, when you don't, because especially when work is being happened primarily remotely, and that has great benefits. We want to know when we should be just leaving things alone remotely and letting people do their work, and then when we need to bring folks together in various ways. So I think that may be, well, another question, and I see a few more things that popped up in the chat. And but the question here is, what's your organization doing to build and retain your team in an evolving remote/hybrid environment? So now's a good time to throw in any questions or, again, thoughts, experiences, because I think there's, for all of you collectively, probably have far more knowledge and experience on this than I. So.
While we're waiting for some comments to come in, Tom, I had a question returning back to resolving conflict by Zoom. I do think that's a much better way to do it. It's Sherry, by the way, in case you didn't know. And so when you're prepping to resolve that conflict by Zoom, would you write down a summary of the issue and what you'd like for an outcome? Would you, kind of write down some points you want to make, or would you just free flow it? Do you have any suggestions on how best to approach that by Zoom?
Yeah, okay. So what you're referring to is me as an individual who's engaged in the conflict.
Yeah, so it doesn't matter who you are, whether the employee or the supervisor or whatever, but you're coming onto a Zoom meeting to resolve that conflict. Should you come somewhat prepared, or should you just kind of allow the conversation to free flow? Yeah.
So, well, the first response is, I think it depends on who you are and what works best for you. But I think by and large, it's good to have, to write down, just as an exercise and document, what is it that's challenging you about this this conflict, or this conversation, or this set of issues. So because you don't want to get in there and then, oh, I should have raised this issue. So, and I think it can also be a therapeutic thing to kind of work through those in some way. And it can also be helpful to have the conversation with somebody else who, and it may not be, sometimes it's not always best to have like the strongest ally be the one that you should, but somebody who can be honest with you and you can listen to their feedback before you actually get into that discussion. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you. There's a couple other questions that came in. One is Kyle Farmer asked, any suggestions for introducing a new employee to a team that's been working fully remote for years, even pre-pandemic?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it was something that I had contemplated including, is the whole issue of onboarding. And I'm not sure I have the best response to that, but I do think generally speaking, you want to do a lot of what I've incorporated here, but just do it more consistently with more focus at the front end. You want to certainly, when you look at the silos piece, I think you want to give them an understanding of the, larger organizational culture and practices, and, just give them every opportunity to connect with their new employees, because it's really, you can see how easy it would be for individuals to be hired and then working almost exclusively from home and not building those essential personal connections. So I hope that helps.
There's another one from Dana Aragon. Hi, Dana. How do you feel about hybrid virtual meetings that are also hosted in person? I think they still are valuable, but others feel that they are not because the virtual participants may not be able to engage.
Yeah, that's a really great question, Dana. And I know it's something that we are struggling with at the Maryland Municipal League. We just bought what's called an OWL, so which has helped because we can capture individuals as they go around the room and they speak. But it is really difficult for those who are participating remotely to be engaged to the same degree as people who are actually in the room. I'm not sure how you overcome that. I certainly understand the allure of the hybrid meetings, but we've had a lot of those same struggles.
Okay, any other questions? We'll wait a couple of minutes. Any lessons learned, any takeaways, Tom, that you want to share with the group before we conclude, unless we have some additional questions?
Well, Sherry, I tried to throw all of my conclusions into the PowerPoint already. So I'm not sure that there's anything off the top of my head that I feel like I've missed, though I'm sure there is plenty.
Okay, I appreciate that. And I thank you very much for your participation with us today. I see that there's been some good resources that have been put into the chat, as well as the resources that you've made available through your PowerPoint. And unless there's any other questions, we'll give people a few minutes back in their day. I know this is the week before a holiday weekend. Happy 4th, everybody. And I hope everybody has a great rest of your day. Thank you so much for joining us.
Okay. Thank you, everyone.